I've been doing videos on this platform for a little over 8.5 years, and between reading the comments on my videos and just paying attention in general to what's playing out in the world right now, a few things have become very clear. America is in this odd place of pulling itself apart at the seams, and when I look at how things are playing out, I often find myself asking what's causing this and how do I avoid getting caught up in these same things that are impacting many of my fellow countrymen. If you're new to this channel, my name is Chris, and on this channel we discuss emergency preparedness, aka prepping. I debated doing this video for a while, but in light of where we stand as a country, the crossroads that we find ourselves at, the deepening divide, the vitriol, the animosity, the tribalism, the us versus them mentality that's becoming increasingly pervasive in seemingly every outlet around us, I think we're taking a moment for us to see if we recognize the common tactics that are used to try and manipulate us. And I intentionally use that word manipulate us because I think it's so important that we understand what information we're taking in and making sure that we don't get caught up in those same lies. And I'm not sure if you get upset when you realize that someone is trying to play you, but I sure do. And I think it's important that we really take a look at this because in our current state of a deepening division, I don't think this situation in our country is sustainable for much longer. Where this is headed is anyone's guess. And if we don't wake up and snap out of this fog, we do so at our own peril. Also, stick around to the end as I'll share a personal story I haven't really shared on the channel before, and it kind of all ties into this. Now, having gone through my own situation years ago has really helped me identify many of the issues that we're about to cover. And before we jump in, no, this is not our typical how-to videos or news segment, but just an honest and candid conversation on things that may already be impacting you in ways that you may or may not know. So what practical things can you watch for to prevent being a victim of this manipulation? The first thing is to understand the media vacuum that we live in. And probably one of the most obvious reasons for this division that we see is silos and camps that are built around singular narratives. You can get all your news from either this source or that source, but you might view one as sacred truth and the other as completely phony lies. And that source of news you trust may actually be stoking this division further by trying to destroy the credibility of other sources. And look, I've been covering news on this channel for a few years, and it's hilarious to watch the mainstream media channels now. And we try so hard to keep politics and wedge issues out of the channel, instead focusing on information that will directly impact you on your preparedness journey. The mainstream media sources, it's hilarious when I watch them to see the obvious manipulation through emotion. Media and news, they're trying to sell you something. Sometimes they do this by eliciting a reaction from you. And usually that reaction is outrage, it's anger, it's frustration, it's anxiety or worry. And these are the easiest reactions to pull out of someone, especially if you present them with a threat, real or not. Emotional marketing has become so common in our modern landscape. There are certain sites I'll visit now for news and there's just no drama. And it's really odd to go to those news sites because I'm like, where's the drama at? And it will detail the events without really trying to elicit some emotional response from me. And then you open up another tab on your browser and go over to the standard mainstream media outlets here in the United States, and that same story will be presented from a completely different angle based on which source you use. And if you consider yourselves a news junkie, but you also have it running 24/7 on repeat in the background of your life, you have to ask yourself if you are unintentionally working yourself up. Remember how much more peaceful and relaxed you were before the round-the-clock news and before every single event and altercation triggered an alert on your phone and was live streamed into your hand. I would encourage you to try a week with it all turned off, especially pundits who only give their opinions and interpretations. Don't feed the machine your sense of sanity. If you know someone that's sucked into this 24/7 cycle of anxiety, I would encourage you to challenge them to turn it off and tune it out for a week. I've done that several times in my own life. I've had to take a fast from the news just to, in a sense, clear my palate and provide them with some basic alternative entertainment other than arguing about the world. And I say this because, trust me, that punditry and that anxiety will be repeating itself in a week if that person or you decide to come back to it. And not to toot my own horn here, but that's why we strive so hard here at City Prepping to keep our news segments and weekly emails that we send out to our community. We try as hard as we can to keep it free from drama. We do this because we trust you're all adults and you can make up your own mind on the facts without someone telling you what to think and feel. It's like this. Have you ever seen a bird feed its babies? What it does is it swallows the food in advance and then regurgitates it up for its babies. And when I turn on the mainstream media or a YouTube video and listen to a talking head and I walk away feeling emotional, it's usually because someone is trying to do the same thing to me. They're trying to chew on something and then give it back to me in a way that they've processed it. And there's clearly an agenda behind it. And look, I can chew on information and process it myself without someone telling me what to think. Again, if your source of information is eliciting a strong emotion that's causing you to feel negatively toward others, be careful. Now, before we go to the next point, I do want to thank today's sponsor of this YouTube ad-free video, BetterHelp. I've mentioned several times in the past that I did occupational ministry years ago, and part of my job was providing therapy. So I've seen firsthand the value of helping individuals work through issues. Ironically, a month ago, a few weeks before BetterHelp actually approached me for the sponsorship, I started using their service. And if you've followed me for any length of time, you know that I tend to be analytical and I tend to think through things a lot. And sometimes I tend to get wrapped up in my own head. And honestly, it's nice to have a professional to connect with and unpack and work through things. We've spoken some in the past on this channel about mental health, but probably not enough. I do recognize that this subject can be a bit taboo in this community, but I firmly believe in working with professional therapists as I've seen the value it has brought to my own life. I know the events of the last 4 years have profoundly impacted many of us, and having to process what lies ahead can also be a heavy burden. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. You can use their service through your phone or computer to do a video chat with a live therapist at a time and location that's convenient for you. And they're usually able to match you with a therapist within 48 hours of signing up for their service. I'll post a link to their site, betterhelp.com/cityprepping, if you'd like to learn more. Now, the second thing that is impacting people is inflation. And look, there's little chance that you have not felt the pinch of inflation. The cost of everything worldwide has gone up, and it's not just in your state or even here in our own country. Again, if you watch the news here in America, you would probably assume that this is just unique to our country because, as in point number 1 earlier, you're probably being manipulated through emotion-based marketing from wherever you get your news that is getting you fired up right now, saying this political party is the problem. The size of the groceries that we purchase has shrunk, called shrinkflation. Corporations, they struggle to maintain high profits even through declining sales because people can't afford their products, which is greedflation. And you have legitimate reasons why supply chains are being slow, halted, or stopped altogether. Things like wars, natural disasters, avian flu, embargoes, and tariffs, even reduced traffic in the Red Sea, Baltimore, Panama, and Suez canals. And the income inequality gap has also exploded. The average person is working much harder, is able to buy less, and asking themselves if it is worth it. And meanwhile, less than 1% of the population makes buckets of money, pays no taxes, and tells us what the future should be. And this can certainly lead to frustration and even anger. It's a natural response. But believe it or not, there is a bit of a solution for this. Most people, they just stop at a budget and they simply go without because they haven't learned how to prep and increase their self-sufficiency. When you refocus on ways to become self-sufficient, independent, and able to do for yourself, cook for yourself, and produce resources for yourself, independent of the fragile supply chain, all things that we cover here on this channel, you don't have time to engage in those things way beyond your control. You become hard focused on living today for today, and it can be a game changer that turns any anger or frustration into a reward and satisfaction. So the next third point is partisan camps. Our most primal instincts, they include instant threat assessment and an us versus them mentality. And this is why we form groups of like-minded people and view others with suspicion or contempt. And it's really instinctual in our own DNA, and it's what has kept us alive for all these many millennia. We see those who are different as threats to our lives and livelihoods. At its extreme, this thinking, it leads us to demonize others or see them as less than human. And we see this form of tribalism in innocent things like sports, but we're increasingly seeing this mindset introduced into how we view our friends, our neighbors, our family, turning us against those with different views, and that's often centered around politics. Algorithms on the internet, they feed us news stories, discussions, and advertisements that really reinforce our own views and isolate us from anyone who doesn't agree exactly as we do. And surrounded by people who share our views, What ends up happening is we become entrenched and dismissive of opposing perspectives, fueling anger and hostility. Let me give you an example to point this out. If you want to compare the social media feeds of different people, all you have to do is grab their phone, someone that's different. If I were to grab my wife's phone, her feed is going to differ drastically from mine on her social media platforms. And if I were to grab my friend's phone, it's the same thing. He's going to have his own set of things that are in his feed. And you can try exchanging phones with a friend or a family member to see this in real time. You might see DIY projects, gardening tips, and feel-good stories in one feed, but another might see looming disaster, horrible crimes, and mob chaos. And people, what they'll often do is build their identity and sense of right or wrong from these narrowly fed algorithmic feeds. And look, if you've been on social media for any length of time, you realize that what you see is often tailored, and it is tailored to your specific likes and dislikes, right? As long as you're aware of that, you're fine. I'm very cognizant about my own biases, and I try my hardest to keep them in check. The sad thing is that most people aren't even aware of this, that the information they're getting from whatever social media platform or the news segment is specifically tailored to them. And they just assume that everyone else views life through that same information that they're looking at on a daily basis. Have you ever been around those types of people that blurt things out, assuming everyone else agrees with their position? I'll be honest with you, I have made that mistake in the past, but I've learned as I've matured to try to hold my own views, but not to use them as a tool to attack others. One fun thought experiment, I've gone back in my feed on Facebook, which I rarely use anymore, but I've looked at some of my posts from 12, 13 years ago, and I am like, who is that? Just my views and the way I approach things was so much different than the way I view things now. I've matured. And I'm trying my hardest these days to focus on what unites me with friends, families, and neighbors instead of what divides me. So the fourth point is government gridlock. And this, again, like the other points, can cause a lot of frustration and anger. And even if you're not following politics, you can see that the government moves very slowly and accomplishes very little that we can tangibly point to and call progress. And what ends up happening is it leads to anger and distrust of government, and politicians further stoked to try and get people to open their wallets and give them donations. You can explore any issue in your country today, and you'll see that the presenter of solutions, though few in number, is shouted out of existence by the microphone grabbers that thrive on sound bites, one-liners, and criticisms of the opposition party. If you've watched any type of political discourse lately, it's usually just people that are yelling to get their soundbite that evening on the news. So if all that's broken, the people who determine the funding for our military, the bridge and road projects, the funding of our schools, the regulation of public services, if that's all broken, it's easy to feel that there's no hope for our future. But look, fretting about it won't do anything but make us lose our minds in frustration and anger. So let me just pause for a moment and just share some of my own personal thoughts. This situation with the government is one of the main driving factors behind me being a prepper. I think we're on a timeline where we are just merely rearranging chairs on a sinking ship. And I know that sounds a bit pessimistic, but I have no illusions that the issues that we face will likely be resolved. Some of these existential issues that we brought up on the channel that are impacting humanity in profound ways. So it's up to me to take care of my family, and it always has been. And look, I could devolve into anger, but instead I've chosen to build systems to protect my family, and that's why I'm a prepper. Now, the fifth point is loss of community or connection. The modern life that we live in often leads to a sense of isolation and a loss of community. The breakdown of traditional community structures and the rise of digital interactions over just face-to-face connections can really leave people feeling disconnected and lonely. I mean, how many of you have sought connection online, like joining an online gardening, canning, hunting, or other hobby group, only need to be bombarded with political rants, conspiracies, criticisms, and people just shouting in all caps? Maybe you've even seen your church take a particular political slant over the last several years instead of just one that focuses on religious teachings. And this proliferation of social media and online interactions has really created this illusion of connection. Yet these virtual relationships, what they do is they lack the depth and support of real life interactions. And this superficial engagement, what it ends up doing is it leaves people feeling more isolated than before they even started into this curated, often unrealistic portrayal of others that we see in social media. And this constant barrage of negative news and online conflicts, what it does is it exacerbates feelings of frustration and hopelessness, really driving people further into their shells. And in a world that we live in, where technology was supposed to bring us closer, it paradoxically only seems to be pulling us apart, increasing feelings of loneliness and anger. And of course, what this ends up doing is making people angry. If you watch this channel for any length of time, you know that I try to encourage community on whatever level you can get, especially at the local level. And this is why. Connecting online in a like-minded community, it's a great start, which is why I started my community on cityprepping.com on my website. But I would encourage you to find ways to connect with others around you proactively. Again, I would encourage you to focus on what unites and not what separates. So let's round out these points with point number 6, which is distrust. And again, I'll be honest here. I'm the type of person who will walk right up to you and start a conversation. I have no problem with that. And it can be about anything. I just enjoy conversing with people. I enjoy getting into deep conversations. I enjoy the back and forth engagement. And one of the things I've learned is I find that asking people questions about themselves, it helps open them up, and the conversation will usually flow pretty quickly from there. And people are often taken aback a little because we have come to really distrust people and their intentions. And I've shared this before, but I was raised in a large church that hosted our Boy Scout troop. Most of my church friends also attended my school. The Scoutmasters were leaders in our church. I mean, it was just a really tight-knit community. Everybody knew everybody. And I was fortunate to be raised in what I would say was a healthy community. I don't know if there was a point in your life where you turned from trusting to distrust, but it's an easy pivot, especially in a world where we're so used to people approaching us with so many agendas, is the word I'm looking for, and it causes mistrust. When someone approaches you on the sidewalk or knocks on your door, do you have an immediate knee-jerk reaction? Which is stronger? Is it curiosity or distrust? Remember when you could stop and ask directions, point something interesting out, or just share a moment with a stranger? Just the other day, I was looking at property in the country. I hope to set up a homestead one day soon to document on this channel. And I pulled onto a remote dirt road, and a few neighbors immediately eyed me. And I turned around in front of a house at the end of a cul-de-sac, and I parked my car on the street. This man, he ended up started walking to his gate on his property. And so I got out of the car, put a big smile on my face, and I walked over to him and immediately introduced myself from a distance. I waved out to him and I said, "Hey, my name is Chris." And I could see he instantly just kind of, I could see he just eased up in that moment. And ended up what happening is we started a conversation very quickly. He opened his gate and I mentioned I was interested in property. Next to his lot, there was a property for sale. And he ended up opening up and sharing a lot of information with me very quickly. And the cool thing is, by the end of the short talk that we had, he said he hoped to see me again. And I say that because we're conditioned these days to see everything with a lens of danger, but it doesn't have to be that way. I would encourage you to look for opportunities to engage with others. You don't instantly have to go to a place of distrust. And look, don't be naive, but don't assume everyone has an ill intention. They've got some agenda with you. So let's round this out and ask the question, what can you do? As I always do at the end of these videos, I try to present solutions. And it's easy to just sit around and get upset with the status of the world we're living in, to rage at the TV, but taking anxiety and turning it into action is something that I recommend people do all the time. And what I'll do is I'll post links in the description and comment section below detailing some simple starter videos, whether that's storing food, storing water, getting a garden going. Simple things that you can do now to insulate yourself from this increasingly uncertain world that we're living in. And while the storm may rage out there, you have the opportunity to control things in your own environment. And as I always say on this channel, no one, let me repeat this, no one is a victim of these circumstances. And that's why I enjoy this community so much. So at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I was going to share my own story and how it ties into this subject. I mentioned earlier in the video that I was in occupational ministry. And what I'm about to share with you, I've shared with a few people at different lengths, but I don't mind bringing it up here because it's very relevant to this conversation. When I was in ministry, the organization that I was part of, it had a lot of problems, and that's putting it mildly. One of the issues, and there was a lot, but one of them was this tribal mindset. It was a very us versus them, this elite mindset that we thought we were better than everyone else. And there was a lot of things that were, kind of like, hey, go prove yourself. Was on course to go to medical school in 99. I did my MCAT. I'm sorry, 98. I was going to start the fall of 98, my interview process. I did my MCAT summer of 98, applied to medical schools, had everything already packaged, sent, and at the last second I pulled out to go start and plant a church in San Diego. I later went on to go to Afghanistan in 03, and some of these events were driven, and to a degree, with this underlying perspective that, you know, hey, go push and prove yourself because you want to be better than everyone else. A bit of arrogance. And the underlying view was that we were always in the right, that we somehow had a claim to truth, our version of truth, and we were better than everyone else. And as you can see here, there was no sense of humility. And we had leadership that could do no wrong. You know, there was this very strong, top-heavy approach of, you know, what was said was followed. And that all came to a crash in 2007 when that ministry inevitably collapsed because of a lot of weird stuff that, again, I won't go into. But I'm sharing this, and it's not easy to share, but it is a part of my life, and it ties into what we talked about in this video. Because it's that old saying, it takes one to know one. Why am I saying that? What I'm seeing playing out in my own nation right now is not too different than what I was raised on, or not raised on, but I went through as a young adult. This political aspect of, you know, we're in this group, the mainstream media that lines up behind that political position. And what it's caused, unfortunately, is a deepening divide within our nation. We're being pumped with hate and division nonstop. And I have been there. And that is why I do not cover politics and other hot button issues on this channel, because I've seen firsthand when you choose to form a wedge, when you choose to split yourself off from people and you don't listen. And no one is really taking the time to be kind and listen to others in this day and age, unfortunately, that we're living in. Kindness is almost, it's seen as weakness. We're seeing this, unfortunately, you know, these positions being taken that whoever your political leader is can do no wrong. Because when you get into that tribal mindset, you throw thinking out the window and it becomes this very tribal attitude. And look, again, I've been there, I've done it. And I will follow no person, no man. And that's why I don't cover politics on this channel, because I've gone down that path of isolating my mindset into that rut. And I refuse to be a part of the division that's growing. And I will not use my platform for that. And I mean, sure, yeah, have your political positions. Nothing is wrong with that. But my encouragement to this community is this, is if I can have an impact on those listening, it's this, is don't turn to anger. It wasn't that long ago that I can remember, wow, we still had our differences. Or was it, I don't know, maybe I'm being naive, but growing up, even in I grew up in the Deep South. We had a certain strong political views, but I don't remember the vitriol being attached to it as we're seeing now. And again, I've been there, I've been caught up in that, but I choose kindness now. I choose not to fall into the trap of anger. And I believe in this nation, and again, if you're watching this outside the United States, we're not unique to this. This is not isolated to just our country. This is happening around the world. And it always starts with you. And I do believe that we have a tough future ahead of us, if I'm being completely honest. And that's why I do what I do as a prepper. But I think we have a choice as to how we'll approach it. I hope you don't allow it to be dictated by anger and hate. I know this is kind of an odd video. It's a different format, but it's just, I enjoy pulling back the veil, I would say, and just being a little more personable. I always enjoy feedback. If you have any, feel free to post in the comments section below. As always, stay safe out there.